All right. Before we get started on this next one, I just want to ask, how many of you believe the official narrative about Bill Cosby, that he was a rapist? Just say yes or no. Yes, I believe it, or no, I have questions. I just want to kind of
in the chat room.
I want to gauge the discussion
we've got,
we have it.
Nearly 20,000 of you watching across all our platforms. So, post in the chat room.
Maybe we can.
A lot of people saying yes,
David,
yes.
can we put a poll up? Yes, you believe it, or never cared? Okay, you're going to care in a second.
Someone says
please.
Never cared. Someone says serial rapist. Others said he was framed.
Let me tell you, okay, you I don't care people, hold on through this segment and then tell me later if you still don't care. I'm just curious. Okay. Well, here we go. Bill Cosby has been denied a retrial in his California case against him by a woman who claimed sexual abuse after Cosby, she says, gave her a glass of wine and then a pill that she says she thought was aspirin, but it lowered her inhibitions, and they had a sexual encounter. This allegedly happened in 1972. Now, Cosby has been accused by several women of sexual abuse, but the story is always the same. They took some pills, it lowered her inhibition. She didn't mean for that to have happened, and then she claims rape. Now, he says that every encounter was consensual and that the women knew, hey, we're going to take some stuff, we're going to have a wild night. He has steadfastly maintained his innocence to his own detriment. In his criminal trial, he refused to admit wrongdoing and refused to take sexual abuse classes, and they denied him parole because of it. He said he would rather serve jail time than do anything that would admit to guilt. Now, the criminal trial is separate from this. That was overturned by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, but now he's been found liable in a civil case in Los Angeles. Now, regardless of what you believe about Bill Cosby, this raises legal questions that could affect everyone, because if lawmakers can revive decades-old claims after the statute of limitations has expired, what exactly is the purpose of the statute of limitations? Do lawmakers do this specifically to prosecute certain people? They did change the laws in New York so that they could prosecute President Trump. Now, did they do this for Bill Cosby? In which case, that is not equal justice under the law. That is lawfare. Can laws be changed just because there's public pressure that demands it? Now, Cosby's case also raises an interesting question about consent, because can impairment alone negate meaningful consent, even when there is no allegation of force or violence? And if so, what is the line? How impaired can a person be? We're talking about pills here, but would that, say, extend to a different substance? Let's say you buy a woman a drink that lowers her inhibitions and she eventually has sex with you and then says, actually, I didn't mean that. That was the wine talking. How do courts now distinguish between criminal conduct and behavior that, while regrettable or perhaps irresponsible, has been long considered a part of ordinary adult courtship? Is this rape by seduction? These are uncomfortable questions, but they increasingly sit at the center of modern law, and they extend far beyond the celebrity of Bill Cosby. So I have invited Lionel to join us. He's from the Lionel Nation YouTube channel, and we're going to hold on to see what Lionel has to say.
Well, and constitutional expert and former prosecutor.
Yes.
Lionel, not just random Lionel.
Right. Yes. Okay, Lionel, first let's start with the statute of limitations, because these allegations date back to the 70s. They would have been time barred under the law, but it was extended. So California then passed this Assembly Bill 2777, went into effect on January 1st of 2023. And then here comes the case against Bill Cosby. It's a 3-year window in which you can sue backdated. It's difficult not to feel like this was put into place to allow high profile allegations. How do you see it?
First of all, what lower inhibitions? The hell are you? I think somebody slipped you something. Okay. These women were knocked out. Did you ever hear? First of all, isn't it funny that whenever I'm on your show, it's always about some kind of deviancy? It's always upset, Diddy or whatever it is. Okay, in that case, it's one thing. Let me tell you how this started. You know where this Bill Cosby thing came from initially? There was a comedian named Hannibal Buress, 2014. Everybody was talking about Bill Cosby being a serial predator. Everybody in the business, women. It was during the time of the old days of the Playboy Club when they would do things like, I don't know. Slip them a Mickey. Remember that one? A Mickey Finn. And this was like the days of Hugh Hefner. It was a different time period. Lowering inhibition is having a Chablis. Giving somebody a roofie or some kind of a drug that was a roofie then, not knocks them out. This is a different story. So,
but what if they knew? Because several women have said, "Yeah, I did Quaaludes with Bill Cosby. That was the party. That's what it was."
Well,
and we can't prove that they didn't know.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, remember, finish this one thing. It was a comedian in 2014. It wasn't the police. Women had gone to the police for years to say, do something. No. You want to talk about lawfare? Let's talk about lawfare in reverse. You never hear about that. Somebody who's not brought to justice, somebody who's not. The Epstein files, that still isn't brought. That's reverse lawfare. So people knew about this. So it took this comedian to bring this up, and somehow somebody had their camera on, and it went viral, and that was it. And they have been talking about this for the longest time. Now, first and foremost, he was denied a new trial because of the trial judge. After the jury found him liable, they said, how about a new trial? The judge says, no, appeal that, which is pro forma. Everybody knows that. This is civil, not criminal. Now, this type of this redo, if you will, this revamping of statute of limitations happened, believe it or not, at the behest of people who were themselves the victims of Catholic schools and Catholic priests and people who claimed to have been violated years ago, decades ago, and they couldn't bring a lawsuit because they were kids or the parents didn't want to cause any problems. That was really what started this. Here in New York, there were two particular extensions that dealt with that. It kind of caught on politically, not just to deal with famous people. Remember, just because you bring a lawsuit doesn't mean you're successful. I'll explain that in a moment. So the idea was that it's also, by the way, one more thing. If minors, a kid, for example, has some type of, let's say, medical malpractice committed against the child, later on, and the parents elect not to sue because they like the doctor or knew the doctor, they will toll the statute in order to allow the statute to be extended so that later on they can bring it after they hit the age of 18. So statutes of limitations can be moved around when the event occurs, when you become aware of it. So believe it or not, there's been a lot of, it's kind of like an Overton window kind of a thing where it can move. So it's not that out of the ordinary. The question you're asking is, the jury decides this. If a woman were to say, I had a drink, or we smoked a joint, or I did something to loosen up, if a jury thinks for some reason or another that removes her ability to consent, that it is sexual battery. I think that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about cases where somebody wakes up. In this particular case, she wakes up and she finds herself, she's nude, but she has underwear on. She knows something happened. And later on, if you said, well, you consented to what? Consent the moment it is either withdrawn or the moment it is deemed by the trier of fact, a jury, a judge, not to have been able to be given. Remember, children cannot consent, but as far as an adult goes, in what started off as a seemingly consensual sexual case, that's a jury issue. And they're going to have to hear the facts of the case. They're going to hear about how a woman, what were the particular cases? She went to a doctor, she had abrasions, trauma, what have you, doesn't remember it, confronted him, he said something. From a practical point of view, how do you even go about this 50 years before saying this is what happened? I am torn between giving people justice, but I understand the due process considerations of somebody who has got to put together a case that's 50 years old. Remember, in murder cases, you know how we have all these cold cases, these cold murder cases, which sound terrific. There are some people who are 80 years old who are still alive who can't help in their own defense. They're almost incapacitated. They're almost incompetent. So I've got a real problem with this. The statute of limitation is for finality. We can't have things open-ended. Certain cases, murder in particular, there is none. But the facts of the case here, as far as why would somebody sue Bill Cosby? For the money.
Well,
for the money. There's nothing new about that. That's why people you don't know how many of those Epstein cases were satisfactorily settled. You don't hear anything about this at all. But if you go through the particular cases, some of these were harrowing. You know, it's one thing for somebody to be loosened up, but you bring up a good question. Let me give you one example of the worst. You're not going to believe this ever happened. There is a famous case, I believe it was California, interestingly enough, to show you how weird the consent thing is. A couple, adult, young, boyfriend, girlfriend, had sex before. They weren't strangers. They were having sex, and she said, "I have to go." Okay? He thought that meant, I don't want some family show here, hurry up. You know, complete the process, so to speak. She did, no problem. Later on, a prosecutor was able to convince a jury that that meant, I am withdrawing consent. Stop. I have to go. Now, to me, that's reasonable. Now, I know this is civil, but that they convicted this guy. It's a very scary thing. And I want everybody listening, especially now when we're in a litigation, more litigious than ever, especially after this. Young men in particular, beware. And if you're a celebrity, you're going to have NDAs signed. You're going to have a witness. You're going to have a post-event review. I'm not kidding you. But Natalie, you bring up a good question. What if we're having a drink and I start off, but all of a sudden, or let's say somebody else is really passes out. They've passed out at their own hand, not because of roofie, not hypnol or some barbiturate. They passed out because maybe they were tired, maybe they were drunk, and they complete the act. Is that sexual battery? Is that rape per se? Technically speaking, yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is, if you start and you have now lowering your tolerance or lowering your ability to object, that's a different story. By analogy, DWI cases, a lot of times in most states they say if you're under the influence, to the extent your normal faculties are impaired, when juries are asked, what does this mean, impaired? Drunk? Intoxicated? No. Impaired. The slightest amount of impairment under most states makes you liable for DUI. So in this case, what you're bringing up, and I agree, this is scary stuff because consent, sexual battery, is really the only time when two people could theoretically engage in something. Robbery doesn't work like that, burglary, nothing else does, where we start off with something consensual, and then at some point, somebody decides, I don't know about this. Either they can't make the statement, they've changed their mind, and it's really scary. If you can convince a jury, and if they can listen to this, and listen to the woman, listen to her testimony, how do you remember these things? Did you call anybody at that time? Did you keep a diary? Every case is different. The fact that it went all that way and the fact that he's famous, look, sometimes fame can actually work in your benefit. So we don't know. We weren't there, obviously. But let me tell you something. To ask your original question, do I think that in all of the cases he was just the victim of his fame? Absolutely not. Now, remember, I'm using things like anecdotal evidence, reputation, what other people have said, and that's kind of dangerous. This is a court of public opinion. But as far as him just, say, I can't believe it. They keep bringing me into court. They keep saying I did this. I don't know why. Maybe it's my fame.
Well, then why have so many other famous people with reputations like this? And I'm not excusing it, but we've had stories of, let's say, Frank Sinatra giving people, drugs in order to have these wild nights. The same with David Bowie, Mick Jagger, Gene Simmons. But they don't get this same, move the statue and get. So I guess I'm saying I don't know how much this was a part of a partying culture, and it would have been wrong across the board. But is there, you know what I'm saying? I'm getting at.
Now you bring up something which is very, very interesting. And today, a lot of people today they're absolutist. It's wrong. I don't care what it was then. What are you going to bring up? Caligula? You're going to bring up a Roman? Or it's like, no, we're not going to bring up that. But you make a very good point, though. There used to be a thing, slip 'em a Mickey, the Mickey Finn. It was, if you knew half of this stuff that was going on at the Playboy Club, at the mansion, it'll make your hair curl. So I don't know. I do think, though, that, believe it or not, in terms of what is expected, let me go a step further. Why would somebody not want to sue Frank Sinatra? Oh, I don't know. There was some allegation, perhaps he might have been mob connected. They might have said, this might not be a good idea. Yeah. Maybe. Or what also, if you were to bring in, remember the days of, and this is for the youngsters out there, groupies. Remember Sweet Sweet Connie, the plaster casters, and women who made their names. They were notorious. You knew that when you go backstage, if it was Led Zeppelin, remember I'm not even going to go through this stuff, but the argument, you're almost like you're walking into a different territory here. Not that it excuses it, but you had to have gone in here knowing a little something. Not that allows this, but you have to wonder sometimes. Were you surprised by this? Your consent or your claim of not being able to consent, you have to take into, as you say, a little bit about the time, a little bit of the zeitgeist, the way things were, the epoch, the way people reacted, what people knew, what people expected. This is why I'm telling you.
I want to interject there. One of the victims went to his house at 2 a.m. So you're not going there for an up and up Catholic picnic.
Or a pudding pop.
But remember, though, you're not going there. And see, this is so funny. And you realize how you are being accused of betraying your gender. That's right. Blame the victim, right? But what you're saying is simply this. They would say to you, I didn't go there at 2 a.m. to be anesthetized.
Right.
That's not why I went. This isn't a walk-in clinic. It's just like when I've got a friend of mine, this guy, he left his car open and they stole his wallet. And I'm saying, what the hell's the matter with you? He says, well, that doesn't excuse it. I said, no, it doesn't excuse it, but you left your car unlocked. You sometimes, and I know people don't do this, but look at the Diddy case. I don't want to bring that up again. Do you know how many people would have been able to testify? All of the bouncers and the women who were trying to pay money to get in. And one more thing, what do you think? There was about 150, I don't know, let's say total professional teams, MLB, NFL, who knows, 200. Do you know the women who go out and try to find where the teams stay?
Where the hotels, yeah.
Hotels
are
the concierge.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody goes in, just as in Diddy, and nobody dragged them and pulled them in, you've got to ask yourself, do you know what you're doing? You're walking into a room so you have to ask. It doesn't excuse it, but you were at least, to use this other thing, you're contributorily negligent. If you accepted, God forbid, to accept an invitation to a Hell's Angels party, I'm just saying, I'm trying to think of, with all due respect to the Hell's Angels, but what I'm saying is, you got to ask yourself sometimes, what are you doing? If Bill Cosby, look at Weinstein, how many of the women went to his house, his room at 2 a.m? I mean, you got to ask yourself, do you think he wants to go for a contract negotiation? Not only that, do you know this is Harvey Weinstein? And I'll bet you anything that Bill Cosby's reputation then was even more well-known than it is now. Yes. I mean, all you have to do, it takes a couple of minutes. Like, have you heard about Bill Cosby? You're going to Bill Cosby's room? Good luck. Take Xanax tonight. You know, nighty-night. There had to have been some reference. Now, again, that doesn't excuse it. But a jury apparently, Natalie heard this and said, you know what? Doesn't matter. He's liable. And it's a very low burden. It's not like reasonable doubt, that seesaw. You know, this is just a little bit. Is it more likely than not that he did this? And the thing is, there does come a point, though, when you're putting on this case. I would have, during cross-examination, say, how do you remember this? Remember the E. Jean Carroll case, supposedly, with Trump? Remember that when she would say things like, how do you remember this? How do I remember? Because I called my friend up, and I told her on the phone, and she told me this, and I was wearing this. And that jury listened to her and said, I believe it, even though the facts of the case, that this occurred at a Bergdorf Goodman, what? Still, that jury heard this, and for whatever reason, and this may come as a shock to you, but sometimes juries find people guilty, not because of the facts, but they think, I ain't that son of a bitch. Who does he, Bill Cosby? I heard it. Look at you, smug. Yeah, who knows? That plays a role. I'm not saying that's the only reason. But unless you're there, and unless you see this woman testify, and you say, how do you remember? How do I remember? Does a grandmother remember when her son was born? Do you remember catastrophic or cataclysmic or major events of your life? There are people walking around with PTSD from World War I who are in their 90s. They remember like it was yesterday. See where we're going with this? Yeah. And the jury will say, that's good enough for me. And not only that, I went to the police, theoretically, and they tried, and they said, you can't do this against Bill Cosby? What, are you crazy? And then finally, thankfully, they opened this up. So unless you're there, unless you hear this, or sometimes you could say, I don't believe a word of this. And Bill Cosby, how he handled this, I have no earthly idea. I don't know about his demeanor. I don't know what his defense was. I don't know what your defense was. Quick, Clayton, last a Tuesday, March 3rd, 1983. What were you doing? Just a minute. Let me check my. You probably
check my diary. Yeah, I don't know. Probably playing with Transformers or G.I. Joe in the backyard in the dirt. But I don't know. I can't be sure.
Or you're going to say, "Who are you again?" And you don't want to sound like a cad, but you say, "No, who are you again?" Yes. Don't you remember her? No.
1983. Yeah.
1972 is the allegation.
I just picked 83. But I mean, this is 54. So what do you do? Do you have receipts? Did you remember somebody? How did you remember that? Now, it's another thing when you go to the emergency room, when you talk to somebody at the time, when you kept records. Again, this is a factual basis, but it goes to show you there is no how do I say this? There's no crime or potential crime that starts off where two people theoretically could have engaged in something and then it became a crime. Like for example, we never said, okay, Natalie, let's you and I pretend we're robbing each other. Okay. You stop pretending, and I'm saying, no, I'm going to go through with it. No, we were kidding. I can't think of anything. Yeah. DUI is the only one, by the way, the only offense where you never went out and thought about doing it. It was an accident. You never said, I'm going to go out, I'm going to drink and drive. That's a close second. This is a weird one. But again, This is civil. Civil. Is it more likely than not, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that Bill Cosby did this 52 years? Is it more likely than not? What kind of burden is that? It's more likely than not that Clayton played the center for the Harlem Globetrotters. Than not? What does that even mean? I don't even know what that means. But that's the burden. That's the reality.
Yeah. And also, there's this idea as a woman that like, oh, well, you had too much to drink. It wasn't on you. You accepted a pill from someone. You weren't entirely sure what it was. You were the victim there, right? So what would you tell your kids? Do not take pills. when you're out
yeah.
from people. Do not incapacitate yourself.
And especially now on the internet, anything you're taking with fentanyl. But also the thing is, you could say it's a different. It's one thing for you to react negatively to a pill you took.
Yeah.
It's another thing for you to take and say, well, that's not what I thought I was taking. He gave me something else, or who knows. But now here's another thing. I'm surprised. This is another last point.
But again,
here.
I just want to point out this teeters on the brink of. Some women said, yeah, I knew I was taking Quaaludes. That was the party. That's what, and he always said so. And then there's some that said, I actually didn't know. We cannot know that. That's unknowable for you and me. It's unknowable.
And there are some women who are so, I don't want to say, they're of a different makeup. They'll say, well, that was my fault. What are you going to do? Live and learn. Others will be devastated for life. Who knows? But you get into this really very strange thing about, and that's the notion of where all of this comes from in terms of consent and the like. And more importantly, we're going to have to be asking ourselves from now on, before I forget, what's even scarier, men, because let's face it, men we're talking about, for the most part, if they're having a hard time with this, and they say, you know what, don't worry. I don't remember this. Well, don't worry about this, because I've got 5 other women that he did this to, and we're going to bring them in as similar fact evidence. They did this to Harvey Weinstein. And they're going to come in, and they're going to tell the jury how they were sexually attacked via this same MO. Exactly. So don't worry. Now you're going to say, wait a minute, who are these women? So Bill Cosby said, wait a minute, I've got 5 other women. We're not charging you with them. They're just adding to this. They're showing that your behavior that night was similar to the behavior you showed against them. That's the worst of the worst. Because now you're bringing in people and you're slipping in new victims that you haven't charged.
Yes.
What? That's what I despise.
And that happened to him in the Pennsylvania case. Yes.
Get him on what he did now.
Yeah.
Not somebody who says, well, you know what, we may not have enough evidence of it now, but I've got about 5 other people. And by the way, it may not have been exactly that, but this dastard, this ne'er-do-well. And pretty soon, then it's almost like having not that you would ever do this, Natalie, I'm just saying, but sometimes when people argue, somebody will say, oh, yeah? Okay, maybe. But don't forget what you did on Christmas. What the hell are we talking about Christmas for? Well, yeah, that's kind of what this is. You're bringing in something else. This is irrelevant. It's immaterial. It has nothing to do with this. Yeah, but this goes to show you that. So this is a very, very dangerous thing. By the way, look at Harvey Weinstein and ask yourself, why is this guy? Why are they even? How bad can this guy be? Epstein did a weekend and go ahead. You would thought Weinstein, he had it all locked up. He could have sold out everybody down the river. And did he? Did he still? I don't understand it. So your question is this. What did he do? Who did he piss off?
Yes.
What
That's
happened
the question
here?
we cannot answer. But I really appreciate your take on this because it's just not so easy to evaluate it in this way.
Do you feel like I made you feel like a little bit more, not that I expressed the confusion, but you feel a little bit more like, yeah, it kind of makes sense, or I didn't know that, because nobody really explains this to anybody.
Right.
And that's the
what
best
I
part about the
feel
segment.
is that the questions are valid. That's all. And that the media's slam dunk case is not. So that's how I feel about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And why do some people appear done with? And also, look at what Michael Jackson went through. Dear God, what this guy with pictures of genitals. I don't remember anybody else doing. Again, you don't want to compare sexual batterers or rapists, but I think we believe that there should be this continuity of treatment, this similarity. Everybody treated alike or not treated at all.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you, Lionel. I really appreciate this chat.
Thank you. I'll see you next time when there's some other sordid, concupiscent, salacious, scabrous, vile form of defiling humanity. And give me a call.
I will. I will.
We have something that's nefarious like that, or some, yeah.
Yeah, our favorite conversation was, it's not illegal to be gross.
Get Lionel.
Okay.
Thanks, Lionel.
And don't forget, be careful of that Rasputin pole, too. That's my favorite.
Exactly.
I like that. All right, all the best.
All
Thanks,
right.
Lionel.
Well, let us know what your thoughts are on that. Yeah, it's confusing. It's not a slam.